A few things we want to keep in mind as we model activity diagrams. I'm a big fan of using operations, which is a model element that can own inputs and outputs, as well as the return, which is a special kind of output. It's the end result of the function. The trick is they have to be owned by blocks. And so a block is the most common building block of a system. It's the basic element that we assemble systems from. And so we have a functional architecture over here that I've started this package. And we're going to go ahead and create a block here. I'm just going to call it a functional block. And I'm going to right-click on it. And I'm going to go ahead and create an element here. And notice these are only the elements that can be owned by a block are presented. And one of these is going to be called an operation. So we're going to call this operation combust fuel. And so we can drag this on here, and this is an operation owned by that functional block of combusting fuel. And if we combust fuel, I think we take oxygen and fuel in, and we put heat, ash, and smoke out. So it can be any of those. And so we need something to show those flows in and out. So we need some signals. And so we come down to our signal library here. So this is how I model. As I create a function, I stop and I define the inputs and outputs robustly at the same time. And so we're going to come to the signal table here. I'm going to lock my library recursively. And now I can add a new signal. Notice I had it typed by signal and I told it where to put them. And though it didn't respect that, so I will have to move it. But we're going to call this one fuel, and we're going to create a air. I'm not going to bother calling it oxygen, and we'll go ahead and create ash and smoke and heat. Now, if I were modeling this seriously, I would be taking my time and documenting all these, but I'm not going to go through that while I'm modeling for you. So I'm going to drag these into the signals package. They're now all here in signals, and now they're available to me to add as parameters on this operation. So as I double click here and go to parameters, I'm going to go ahead and create a parameter here. Now I could name it. I could call this, airflow in, but I don't have to. The direction is in. I'm going to drag on air as my type. And this is showing as an in. My multiplicity here, I can leave it unspecified, which is assumed to be 1, or I could define it as optional if I wanted. And so I've gone ahead and done that, and I hit the back button. So that keeps me in the combust fuel operation, and now I can see the airflow in is an in. So I can clone this, and my other input here is going to be fuel. So I'm dragging fuel in here, and I'm just going to delete the name. Often you need to have a name if the signal is well typed. And so I have that as well. So now we have air and fuel in, and I'm going to go ahead and create heat out and define this as an out. So I can have in, out, out, or return. This is going to be an out. So I have heat out. And I'm also going to have smoke. And I'll make that optional because I may or may not get smoke. And I'm going to clone that also and make ash, because ash may or may not be produced also. Now I'm going to close that. And if I go back to my cooking food here, notice that I've got a whole bunch of extra pins now. I'm going to delete the target pin with a Control D. You don't use that. And here's the name. Now notice we don't see the types here. So I like to see the types on my parameters. So I'm going to stop for a moment here. Notice the blue T means this has been typed. I'm going to right click and go to symbol properties. And I'm going to come here to show type and make it true. So now I can see that that's fuel. So now that I have this selected, I'm going to edit, select all of the same type. And I can paste that style or make it the default. Actually, I'm going to make this the default. So I'm going to select it. And I'm going to set this as the default type going forward. And I now have set this up so that I now have this is the name : type. This is just showing the type. I'm going to do the same thing here to the output pins. I'm right-clicking and saying show type. I'm going to make that the default symbol style. And I'm going to apply the default symbol style to these also. And so now this is a nice way to show that the combust fuel, we can rigorously see the inputs and outputs. So I very much like to use operations as my functions because it forces me to define my inputs and outputs rigorously. You could just throw any old action node down here and do the same thing, but I'm not a big fan of doing that. So that's why I strongly prefer to use operations, because they have to be owned by someone and because you can define your inputs and outputs. Now, one other thing we should point out is that this is kind of an ongoing function, and so the ash, smoke, heat, fuel, air, these are all kind of continuously coming in and out, so they're basically all streaming. And so I'm going to come here and set all these to isStream true, because this is basically something that happens continuously during the combust fuel process. So that means that the function doesn't have to complete before this happens. And so because this has that continuous feeling to it, I'm setting the isStream to true to all these.